Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are doing something a bit different and honestly a ton of fun. We're going to decode 5 absolutely essential everyday English phrases, and we're doing it using the hilarious children's book Noodlehead Nightmares by Ted Arnold, Martha Hamilton, and Mitch Weiss. Now, you're probably thinking, wait, a children's book? But seriously, sometimes the absolute best way to really grasp conversational English is to see how it's used, or in this case, completely misused, by characters who take literally everything literally. It just perfectly highlights how native speakers actually use these idioms in the real world. So let's dive right in. To set the stage for the crazy world of our main characters, Mac and Mac, I've got a slightly silly question for you, straight from the book. How do you hide a noodle head? I mean, if you've got 2 literal pieces of pasta walking around, how on earth do they completely disguise themselves from the neighbors? Well, their brilliant logic gives us the answer: wear a hat. Yep, Mac and Mac genuinely believe that just popping a hat on their heads makes them entirely invisible to the outside world. As you can probably guess, learning English with these 2 today is going to be a blast, because their totally absurd logic actually gives us the perfect backdrop for learning some really practical vocabulary. All right, here is our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll briefly meet the Noodleheads, just so you get their unique way of thinking. Second, we'll cover greetings and great ideas. Third, dealing with nightmares. Fourth, sleep and relaxation. And finally, number 5, your turn to practice. We've got 5 awesome phrases to get through, so let's hit it. Section 1. Meet the Noodleheads. Literal thinkers. Mac actually perfectly captures their whole mindset when he says, "You can tell we're noodleheads by looking at us because, well, we are noodles. But we're harder to spot if we wear hats." Right? They are the ultimate literal thinkers. Like, if they close their eyes, they just assume the whole world disappears. It's goofy, it makes 0 sense, but it sets up some incredibly funny conversations that we can actually learn from. Moving into Section 2, greetings and great ideas, mastering the basics. Okay, so picture this scene. Mac and Mac are wearing their hats, completely convinced they're perfectly disguised. Then Farmer Spud walks right up to them and calls them noodleheads. They are just shocked. They realize the disguise totally failed, so they panic, abruptly end the conversation, and try to make a run for it by blurting out, "Oh yeah, we forgot. See you later, Farmer Spud." And boom, that brings us to phrase number 1. See you later. Basically, this is just a super casual, friendly way to say goodbye to someone you expect to bump into again. Now, the Noodleheads use it as a sort of quick escape hatch from an awkward moment, right? But in real life, you can confidently drop this simple farewell with friends, your coworkers, or, the barista at your local coffee shop. It's just way more natural than a stiff, formal goodbye. So after fleeing Farmer Spud, they obviously need a new disguise. Mac says, "Maybe we should switch hats." And his brother replies, "Good idea. Then he won't recognize us." Once again, the sheer ridiculousness of thinking that just swapping the hats they are already wearing creates a brand new, foolproof disguise. But hey, it gives us our second phrase, good idea. We use this one to enthusiastically agree with a plan or suggestion. The key takeaway here is that when someone offers a solution, whether it's brilliant or totally minor, saying good idea validates them and builds a really positive connection. It's an absolute staple in conversational English. Actually, later in the story, their buddy Meatball wants to steal their apple pie, so he pitches a Pete idea, a pie idea, to have a sleeping contest. And of course, the Noodleheads enthusiastically agree, shouting, "Good idea!" or, well, good Pete idea. Which leads us to Section 3, dealing with nightmares, literal versus figurative. The setup here is priceless. Mac and Mac decide to sleep outside in the dark grass simply so they don't have to make their beds the next morning, obviously. But it gets dark, they get completely spooked, and they end up physically tripping all over each other. One of them actually whacks his own foot with a stick because he thinks it's a monster. Lying there all tangled up, one groans, "Our legs are all tangled. This is a nightmare." They're having a very literal, physical bad time out there in the dark. Now, in the book, a Noodlehead nightmare is this extreme, literal scenario, like imagining a massive storm picking up a whole chicken coop and smashing it right through the bedroom ceiling. But an everyday nightmare for you and me, that's usually figurative. It's spilling hot coffee all over your fresh shirt right before a huge meeting. It's missing your train by 2 seconds. It's your computer crashing and losing that file you've been working on all day. So phrase number 3 is, what a nightmare. Now, yes, it can literally mean a scary dream, But much more often, native English speakers use this to describe a really frustrating, difficult, or just totally messy situation in daily life. Later on, when the Noodleheads realize they still have to go inside and make their beds anyway, they groan, "What a nightmare." You can totally use this phrase to show solidarity with a friend when things are just going completely wrong for them. It's all about empathy and sharing that frustration. All right, Section 4, Sleep and Relaxation, Setting Boundaries. Remember that PDA we talked about? Meatball basically tricked the brothers into taking a nap, claiming whoever has the best dream wins their mom's fresh-baked apple pie. So Mac and Mac are lying there, practically forcing themselves to fall asleep so they can dream and win. One starts making a bunch of noise and the other just snaps, "Quiet, I'm trying to sleep." And that is phrase number 4, I'm trying to sleep. It's a very direct and sometimes pretty firm way of asking people to keep it down when you desperately need to rest. Now, the Noodleheads were just yelling it competitively to win a pie, which, spoiler alert, Meatball totally ate while they slept. But you can use this in everyday life all the time. It is literally the perfect, universally understood way to set boundaries with, say, noisy roommates, loud kids, or a partner blasting the TV way too late at night. Okay, but before they can actually sleep, Mac runs into a problem. He can't find his pillow. So the other Mac chimes in with some advice. Relax. Think about it. A pillow is something with feathers inside, right? So put these feathers inside something. Now, because they are complete Noodleheads, Max shoves his feathers into a hard wooden treasure box, tries to sleep on it, and obviously just gets covered in splinters. Look, their execution was an absolute disaster, but the phrase itself, incredibly useful. Just think about some of those everyday stressful moments where you can jump in with, relax, think about it. Maybe a friend loses their house keys and is starting to fully panic. Or you miss the morning bus and your coworker is stressing out right next to you. Or maybe your younger sibling is just completely overwhelmed with their homework. That brings us to our 5th and final phrase, relax, think about it. This is just a remarkably helpful thing to say to calm someone down and encourage them to tackle a problem logically instead of totally freaking out. It kind of hits pause on the emotion and gets that rational brain working again. Just, make sure that when you tell someone to think about it logically, they come up with a slightly better solution than taking a nap on a wooden box full of splinters. And finally, Section 5, your turn to practice. Bring it to life. So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. What was your last everyday nightmare, and how did you use a good idea to solve it? Take a quick second right now and just practice combining this new vocabulary in your own head. Picture that frustrating situation and imagine someone turning to you and saying, relax, think about it. See, learning English does not have to be a boring chore. As Mac and Mac have so brilliantly shown us, it can actually be pretty entertaining. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, see you later.